Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, and for today's headlines we have Chicago Museum Director under investigation after airplane incident, Inside Starbase, Elon Musk is new city, Trump says he will reopen Alcatraz for the most ruthless and violent prisoners, a Maryland town backed Trump's cost-cutting pledge, now it's a target, tailoring black style, dandyism shines at the 2025 Met Gala. Chicago Museum Director under investigation after airplane incident. James Rondeau, the director of Art Institute of Chicago, took a voluntary leave after a report says that he stripped off his clothes during a flight to Germany. James Rondeau, the president and director of the Art Institute of Chicago, has taken voluntary leave from the museum after an incident on board a flight to Germany last month. During the incident, which occurred on April 18th and was reported by CBS News, police were called to United Airlines Flight 953 after it landed in Munich from Chicago, following reports that Rondeau had stripped off his clothes. CBS reported that the incident occurred after he drank alcohol and took prescription medication. A spokesman for the Art Institute on Sunday confirmed that the report was accurate and that Mr. Rondeau had to take leave from work. In a statement, the museum said, "The Art Institute takes this very seriously and has opened an independent investigation into the incident to gather all available information." Rondeau did not respond to requests for comment. Founded in 1879, the Art Institute is one of the country's leading museums with an operating budget of $120 million and a full-time staff of about 600. Visitors come all over the world to view its masterpieces, including George Seurat's A Sunday on La Grande Jatte, Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, Paul Cézanne's The Bathers, and The Bedroom by Vincent van Gogh. Last fall, the museum announced a $75 million gift from Aaron I Fletcherman, a trustee, and his partner, Lynn Lougheed, to support new galleries in late 19th century modern and contemporary art. Rondeau, whose total compensation is more than $1 million according to the most recent tax records, was appointed in 2016 after serving as the Institute's chairman and curator of modern and contemporary art. He has been a leading proponent of integrating works by women and artists of color into the collection. This variety and balance is core to our mission, Rondeau told The Times in 2022. We're able to leverage more established names while introducing new work and providing a more expansive view about contemporary art. Inside Starbase, Elon Musk's new city. On Saturday, local residents who work for Elon Musk's rocket company voted to create an official city for themselves, Starbase, Texas. Over the last few years, Elon Musk's SpaceX has been building a kind of company town around its launch site in Cameron County, Texas, near the U.S.-Mexico border. SpaceX has used its launch pads to test and launch larger and larger rockets starting around 2019. It was the reason for the company's move to this area along the Gulf Coast. With approval from the county, SpaceX closes the public beach during launches, angering some longtime residents. But a bill that would have allowed the new city of Starbase to approve beach closures on its own failed last month. Texas State Highway 4, included in the city, is the only road in and out of Starbase. Portions of the two-lane highway are closed during launches. This area has housing for employees of SpaceX, including a home where Mr. Musk is registered to vote in Texas. There are Airstream trailers, modular homes, and some larger houses. Much more appears to be planned, including outside the city's boundaries, which could eventually be expanded via voluntary annexation. Here are the company's rocket manufacturing facility and offices, which have also grown quickly. In one building, a huge mural depicts a colony of Mars, which Musk hopes to reach. The city's borders snake around various parcels of land owned by SpaceX, including some that still appear to be vacant, suggesting opportunities for further growth. In some places, like this lot, SpaceX is already building more than a dozen larger homes and is planning for retail businesses, including a grocery store and a cafe. The plans for this city also appear to include more housing, potentially expanding into the wetland, which could require state or federal approvals. But Starbase's initial boundaries contain a relatively small 1.5 square miles or so, and do not include all the property owned by SpaceX in the area. For example, the planned school, Ad Astra, is contained within the city, but this testing site seen here is outside the city limits. The area remains remote, about 20 miles from Brownsville, the nearest city. The drive can sometimes take 45 minutes or almost an hour because of traffic and slowdowns at the Border Patrol checkpoint on Highway 4 between Brownsville and Starbase. The creation of the city Starbase followed one of the nation's more unusual elections. No campaigning took place, and there were no yard signs or other evidence of a consequential vote in the area. According to preliminary results, the measure passed by a whopping 212 to 6, the kind of margin that's been expected but was very unlike most contests in the deeply polarized nation. Under state law, a new city can be incorporated after a certain number of residents file a petition to do so, and a majority of voters approve it. Only registered voters who live within the proposed boundaries are able to take part in the election. In the area of Starbase, that's about 280 people, most of whom either work for SpaceX or have a relative who does. A majority of the eligible voters registered in the area since the start of the year, and 90% had done so since 2024. 2/3 were men, and the average age of about 27. Many had never taken part in any election type before, but turnout was more than 75% in this one. It was not clear whether Mr. Musk voted. As part of the incorporation election, voters also chose a slate of elected officials to run the new city, including its new mayor, Bobby Pendon, a SpaceX vice president, and 2 city commissioners. Initially, the candidate for mayor had been a different SpaceX employee, but he was replaced by Mr. Pendon on the ballot. Neither responded to requests for comment. SpaceX has explained little about its plans for the new city beyond its intention to have a Starbase take over some functions that the company itself has been conducting, such as managing utilities and roads. Some local residents say that there had been talk of connecting the city to a local water system. As it stands, residents must have their water trucked in from Brownsville. But the company has filed paperwork in the state to spend millions building the school, power plant, and commercial center along with a sushi restaurant near Mr. Musk's house. Trump says he will reopen Alcatraz for most ruthless and violent prisoners. President Trump said he was ordering federal agencies to rebuild and reopen Alcatraz, the notorious maximum security prison that closed more than 60 years ago. I'm directing the Bureau of Prisons, together with the Department of Justice, FBI, and Homeland Security, to reopen the substantially enlarged and rebuild Alcatraz to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders, Trump said in a post on Truth Social. The historic former U.S. penitentiary Alcatraz opened in 1934 and is widely known as The Rock. The buildings dominate the craggy landscape of Alcatraz Island, which lies about 1.5 miles north of San Francisco's famed Fisherman's Wharf. Alcatraz once housed dangerous criminals such as the infamous mobster Al Capone, under an incarceration strategy that sought to concentrate difficult prisoners in one facility, segregating them from less dangerous inmates in the prison system. Trump's message suggests he wants to restore Alcatraz to its original dual purpose. The twin goals for building the original prison, according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, were to deal with the most intolerable inmates in federal prisons, and to show the law-abiding public that the federal government was serious, and to stop rampant crime in the 1920s and 1930s. Rebuild and open Alcatraz, the president said on Truth Social. He later added his message: the reopening of Alcatraz will serve as a symbol of law, order, and justice. Trump did not provide details about the timeline for reopening the prison, and the National Park Service did not reply to NPR's request for comment about the president's new plan for Alcatraz before the story published. But enacting Trump's proposal would come with a steep price tag, both for constructing and operating a new prison facility on an island whose most plentiful natural resource is sandstone. Alcatraz was shuttered because the institution was too expensive to continue operating, according to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It said operating the island prison was nearly 3 times more expensive than any other federal prison at the time. This isolation meant that everything, food, supplies, water, fuel, had to be brought to Alcatraz by boat, the Bureau said. For example, the island had no source of fresh water, so nearly 1 million gallons of water had to be barged to the island each week. Then, U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy closed the federal penitentiary in 1963. Alcatraz is currently a museum administered by the National Park Service as part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area since 1972. Placing the prison in historical context, the NPS says, it represents the federal government's response to post-prohibition and post-depression America. Both the institution and the men confined within its walls reflect our society during this era. The original impetus for creating the Alcatraz prison, the Park Service says, lay in the U.S. government's desire to create a high-profile prison that represented the Justice Department's response to fears around public safety and organized crime. For federal prison officials, Alcatraz served as an experiment in handling problematic inmates, the Park Service says. It added, the model they developed on Alcatraz would later serve as a blueprint for the high-security prison located in Marion, Illinois. Since returning to the White House in January, Trump has unveiled a string of high-profile initiatives that he says will protect public safety and also crack down on unlawful immigration. They include deporting migrants and potentially U.S. citizens to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. Alcatraz was initially viewed as a defense outpost in San Francisco Bay when it was brought under federal control by President Millard Fillmore in 1850, according to the NPS. But the U.S. soon began using the island as a prison. Groups housed there include captured Confederates in the 1860s, members of the Hopi tribe in the 1890s, and prisoners from the 1898 Spanish-American War. In the early 1900s, it became a site for U.S. disciplinary barracks for the U.S. Army. In 1933, the island was transferred to the U.S. Department of Justice for use by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, according to the Bureau of Prisons. Alcatraz Island is now a popular National Park Service site that has been open to the public since 1973. A Maryland town backed Trump's cost-cutting pledge. Now it's a target. Frank Davis saw a lot of waste during his decades in the federal government. In November, he voted for Donald Trump to get rid of it. So far, Davis likes a lot of what he's seen. I'm probably going to get shot for this, but he's doing what he said he was going to do, said Davis, who serves as mayor of the town of about 3,000 people in western Maryland, just south of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. In March, the Trump administration suddenly canceled in-person classes at the National Fire Academy here, which trains the country's firefighters. The academy is not only a big part of Edinburgh's identity, it also helps drive the local economy. Davis says the administration is not reviewing the academy's operations, and he is hopeful it will restore classes. If not, he says, he will see the administration somewhat differently. It will change my outlook to say that they're not being fair, said Davis, who also served as emergency medical services captain at the local firehouse known as Village and Hose Company. They're just going in to cut and not caring what they cut. Edinburgh voted for President Trump in November. NPR interviewed about 24 people here. Almost all of them voted for Trump, and many said his plans to cut federal spending were a key attraction. Now they say they are puzzled as to why the administration would cancel national training for firefighters. Dennis O'Neill is also puzzled. He served for 2 decades as superintendent of the academy, which he says trained 8,000 to 10,000 firefighters on campus each year. The academy, often referred to as the National War College for Firefighting, offers courses in everything from leadership and management for fire chiefs to how to conduct fire, arson, and explosion investigations. The National Fire Academy takes men and women out of their comfort zone and exposes them to serious tragedies and forces them to work through what kind of decisions they're going to make, says O'Neill, who lives over the border in Pennsylvania. If the courses aren't restored, O'Neill says, Americans will pay. We are on a very long, slow path to self-destruction, he says. Every day that training is unavailable to the locals is one day closer to disaster they can't handle or won't know how to handle. The Federal Emergency Management Agency oversees the academy, which pays for firefighters to come to Edinburgh. When NPR asked why classes were canceled, FEMA did not answer directly, but suggested in a statement that it had to do with travel costs. The bottom line is we are no longer paying for non-employee travel, the statement read. We are only authorizing travel for mission-critical programs, and this isn't one. Some of these classes are still available online. The Fire Academy website does show some upcoming in-person courses. They've been left up for now in case the administration changes its mind. John Beck, who serves as fire chief of the Waynesboro Volunteer Fire Department nearby in Pennsylvania, had applied for a weekend leadership and development course at the academy in July. It would be his first one, but he doesn't expect it will happen now. He also says the online courses don't cut it. Beck, who runs a landscaping company, works for free as a fire chief. He voted for Trump and supports cutting waste and making government smaller, but Beck doesn't see how training first responders is wasteful. We're only 100+ days in, Beck says of Trump's current term. I wish things were going differently. Beck doesn't regret his vote. Yet. I'm not 100% there yet, but it may not take much more, he says. Back in Edinburgh, the dinner crowd is arriving at the Oat House, a family-run pub and home away from home for firefighters who train at the academy. Over the decades, firefighters have left thousands of patches from their departments, which now blanket the walls of the pub. They include patches for a government fire bureau in Taiwan and departments in Bath, Maine, and Juneau, Alaska. Firefighters make up more than 30% of the pub's business. Co-owner Susan Glass is worried about the long-term impact. I've already told a lot of our employees that it's a possibility they won't have a job for the summer, but we're hoping things open back up, Glass says. In fact, many of the town's residents hold out hope that the administration will see the value of the academy and start classes again. Glass also voted for Trump, but feels the administration is moving too fast. I agree with a lot of things they're doing, but sometimes I disagree on how they're doing them, said Glass, who thinks the administration shouldn't try to do so much at once. Maybe spread it out a little bit. It just seems like it's one hammer after another. Some members of Maryland's congressional delegation have pressed the administration for answers about the cancellation of the academy's classes, but said they've heard nothing back. I have no idea why they're doing this, to Representative April McCain Delaney, whose district includes Emmitsburg. It's absolutely nonsensical. Senator Chris Van Hollen, a fellow Democrat, said he's equally baffled. It's extremely short-sighted and dangerous to cut this program, he says. Tailoring black style. Dandyism shines at the 2025 Met Gala. When attendees hit the red carpet of this year's Met Gala, they will be dazzling and stunning looks that pay homage to the history, defiance, and cultural influence of black style. The theme for the 2025 gala is Tailored for You, with the event honoring and exploring the fashion narrative and history of black dandy. This theme was reinforced by the gala's Tailored for You dress code, which inspired by the 18th century dandy. Clothing will focus on menswear and tailored suiting. The focus on black dandyism, an aesthetic and cultural tradition rooted in defiance, elegance, and self-definition, allows this year's gala to be more than a fundraiser. It's a reclamation for many people. The title of this year's Costume Institute Spring exhibit is titled Superfine, Tailoring for Black Style. In an interview with Morning Edition, Ruth E. Carter, who is 2018, became the first black woman to win an Oscar for costume design, says the theme is a powerful tribute to a legacy often overlooked in mainstream fashion circles. With her acclaimed costume design work on projects like Black Panther, Malcolm X, and Amistad, over her career, Carter has on numerous occasions crafted looks for film and TV productions that offer varying versions of black dandy style. Black dandyism is a form of performance, identity, and individuality, Carter told NPR's Michael Martin. It's how we define ourselves. It's a cultural declaration, male or female, or any gender. It's genderless. From colonization to couture. Historically, the figure of the dandy often conjures image of European aristocrats like Belle Brummel or F. Scott Fitzgerald's Gatsby character. Black dandyism serves as a tool for black Americans to express themselves, allowing them to regain control of their agency and personal narratives. For black communities, dressing fine has long been a form of resistance, sartorial activism that threads self-worth, rebellion, and creativity into every scene. It's garments of protest. It's the garments of freedom, Carter said. When you think about the Zoot Suit riots of the 1940s, you're looking at black and Latino men who were attacked for wearing wide-legged trousers and long chains. That was fashion as resistance. This is an expression of provocation. Monica L. Miller, a professor at Barnard College and guest curator for the Met exhibition, wrote the book on how the black community has used fashion as a vehicle to express themselves. Slaves to Fashion, Black Dandyism, the Style of Black Diasporic Identity. Miller traces how enslaved Africans were sometimes forced to dress in luxurious garb by their enslavers, turning them into walking advertisements of their owner's wealth. But in a profound twist, black communities later appropriated that very aesthetic, using style as a declaration of agency and self-definition. Carter sees this moment at the Met as a culmination of those acts of reclamation. It's about celebration as much as rebellion, she said. It's a full-circle moment. Tailoring as testimony. From Ma Rainey's feathered hats to structured suits of Duke Ellington and Malcolm X, Carter notes that black dandy can be found across generations and genders. You can be finely tailored and represent power, identity, and individuality, she said. The same cane and top hat we associate with male dandiness were worn by women like Madam C.J. Walker. We've always stylized our lives, even when we couldn't afford to. The idea that style is tied to power and identity is woven through Carter's own work, especially in her latest film, Sinners, in which Marco B. Jordan plays twin brothers navigating Jim Crow-era Mississippi with Chicago swagger. Their sharp suits, Carter explains, signal more than fashion. They reflect upward mobility, diasporic identity, and a sense of having it made despite the odds. They worked for Al Capone, swindled money and booze, and came back to the Mississippi Delta with power, Carter explained. It's reverse migration, and their look tells that story. A showcase of black fashion history. For Carter, the night is a tribute to the centuries of influence black communities have had on fashion, often with limited resources but unlimited imagination. It's about how we stylize trends from Harlem to Chicago to Texas, Carter says. It's how we made our way out of no way. As Black fashion takes center stage at arguably the most prestigious event in the world, Carter sees a powerful convergence between costume design, storytelling, and celebration of the history of Black fashion. This Met Gala will be unlike any other, she says. It's our full dimensionality on display. That is all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye!